Welcome back, everyone, to Political Connections. Supervisors of elections are preparing to send out vote-by-mail ballots for the August 23rd primary election. But when it comes to a congressional district in Tampa Bay, there's been some legal disputes over exactly who should be on that ballot. And joining me now to talk more about this is James Judge. He's a Republican candidate for Congressional District 14. Welcome. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me.
We're going to talk about what has been going on with the ballot in just a moment. But first, let's get to know who you are and why you're running. I know you're a lifelong Tampa Bay. You're born and raised here, a military career. Just tell us about who you are and why you're running.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised right here in Florida, in Clearwater. Went to Skycrest Christian, Oak Grove Middle, Dunedin High School, where our great governor DeSantis went to school. Actually was friends with Christina, his sister. I graduated from Eckerd College in St. Pete. I served in the U.S. Coast Guard, served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I own a small business here in the Tampa Bay area, which we put on events like the Skyway 10K. We work with veterinary hospitals, counterterrorism, defense organizations, food and beverage, a lot of different organizations, pet charities, and been doing that since 2011. I love it here. This is my home, and I just got frustrated with everything going on the past 2.5 years. When the government said that it was illegal for you and your family to walk on the beach, or parts of South Florida made it illegal for people to go out on their boats, when they shut down boat ramps, when we closed churches, when we closed businesses, I was outraged. When we gave a guy who, if he would not have been on drugs, drunk, trying to pass counterfeit currency, a nationally televised funeral, I was outraged. When we armed the Taliban and left billions of dollars of weapons there, I was outraged. This administration has failed at every single level, and I just said, you know what, if they can do this, I could certainly run and do a lot better, so I'm running.
And that is what we're here to talk some more about. You almost didn't get to be on the ballot because the State Department Division of Elections took you off over a technicality.
Sure.
On the paperwork. So you're back on. You sued to get back on the ballot. And that's good to go.
Right. The question with that was that there's two documents. There's a state oath and a federal oath. And the state had provided directions in one document that said fill out the federal oath form, but the links to it were broken. So when my general consultant went and looked for the links to find the form, there was another document that was a state document that said it was a May 17th, 2022 memo to federal candidates that actually told the federal candidates to fill out the state form. Found the state form, and we signed that. It does everything that the federal form requires. You have to say that you're qualified under the U.S. Constitution, which I am. And I also had to pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. The one thing that I did above and beyond, I'm a little bit of an overachiever, I also pledged to support and defend the laws of Florida and the Constitution of Florida. So I guess that's what people had a problem with. But we did everything that was required under the law, and the judge sided with us in that case, and we're on the ballot. So,
how did that initially come to anybody's attention?
In terms of how did they find out about it? Well, what was really weird is I actually was qualified. The state accepted the paperwork, reviewed it, approved it, and qualified me. I was the first Republican candidate qualified in 2014. It wasn't until 5 days after qualification ends that they notified us, called me by phone. Apparently, the Democrats had done some digging and found out that my team had made a clerical mistake, which ultimately I'm responsible for that, but it was a mistake. We still met all the legal threshold criteria for what needed to be done. And I think that's why the state originally accepted it. When you mix that with the contradicting information they provided in the instructions and the fact that they didn't give us an update to say, hey, you didn't fill out the proper paperwork, which my opponent was afforded, many other people were afforded that opportunity. They never told us that. They said, hey, this is approved and you're qualified. So that's why we fought it, and that's why the judge sided with me. I'm back on the ballot.
Okay, so let's talk about your opponent in the primary, who it's still up in the air for him if he's on the ballot because the Democrats did some digging on his qualifying as well. We're talking about Jerry Torres running for Congressional District 14 as well. There's some discrepancy on the oath that you have to sign and send in, and they still have a hearing to come on this as to whether he's going to get to run. What's your take on that?
Well, the difference between his and mine is mine was a clerical issue. We filed the wrong form. It still met all the criteria. he filed the right form, but it was kicked back because they had put the wrong oath on there and also said online verification for the notary, which was a Mississippi notary. The next form they submitted on the 16th, or actually it was submitted on the 17th, it was dated the 16th, was a Mississippi notary, had the exact same identical signature, and said it was verified in person. The morning of the 17th, it got rejected, and it was turned back in a couple hours later, and it had a third notary that signed it, had the same exact identical signature on it in the exact same position. And somehow that happened while Jerry was allegedly over in Africa. He was posting from Africa on Facebook. There's video of him in Sierra Leone. So the question is, did a notary in Mississippi, which is against the law in Mississippi for a notary to notarize something outside of the state, did they travel to Africa and have him sign his exact identical signature? Or did someone on his team not tell the truth and submit some information, some sort of paperwork that's not accurate or fraudulent? I'm not saying that happened, but if it did happen, I would expect that a person who didn't qualify properly, especially if it was done in a dishonest manner, would drop from the race.
He's got $15 million potentially to put into this race, so if he were to drop out, that would certainly be beneficial to you, but we'll have to see how that plays out. I think the 18th is when the hearing on this all comes up. So
yes, ma'am, it is.
We'll see. In the meantime, you made some headlines this past week by offering to raffle off 4 AR-15 style rifles. Was it to raise money for your campaign? Or, and that had some folks talking. Why now? Why do that now?
We've been playing this for months. I mean, the AR-15 is the most common rifle in America. It's the most common rifle that's loved by veterans. I think there's 10 million of these out in circulation, and most people, if you served in the military, you know how to use an AR-15. It's the same style weapon, but it's semi-automatic. There's a lot of false information out there about how many rounds per minute they can fire. They're semi-automatic. It's one pull per trigger squeeze and one bullet goes out. It is for self-defense. I think, my opponent wanted to limit the amount of rounds that you're allowed to have in a magazine. The Biden administration's talked about limiting those rounds, and I'm just not for that. I'm for Americans having their Second Amendment right. It shall not be infringed. And when we're talking about why somebody would need extra rounds, well, one, I don't want my wife or a member of my family or myself to be only beholden to 5 rounds in a gun when there may be multiple intruders. We saw in 2020 the riots. We saw police precincts burned to the ground. We saw cities set on fire. Right here in Tampa, we saw buildings set on fire, and we saw the government say, you know what, we're not going to protect this property. We're going to let it go. And people have a right to defend their homes, their businesses, their property, and their lives. And I think that you should have every bullet that you'd like to be able to do that. We
did ask Kathy Castor, who is the congresswoman in that district, if you win the primary, you'd be facing her, what she thought of this idea to raffle off the AR-15 style weapon. So we want to play that and get your reaction to what she had to say.
Okay.
It's dangerous to be promoting military-style assault weapons from someone who's a candidate for Congress. I mean, as a public servant, your job is to keep the community healthy and safe, to protect your neighbors, not to promote violence. So I think he's just demonstrated how extreme he is. Another extreme Republican trying to get attention that really is not in the best interest of the Tampa Bay area or our community.
All right, promoting violence, extreme, your reaction?
I mean, Kathy Castor is calling me out for this. It's kind of ridiculous. Extreme, is it extreme to support the Bill of Rights? Is it extreme to support our Constitution? Under Castor's watch, she says it's her duty to make sure that the community is safe. She's failed tremendously at that. The murder rate skyrocketed in Tampa. It's doubled in the past 2 years. Under her watch, crime has gone through the roof. So violent crime in particular has gone through the roof. I mean, one, I'm pro-Constitution. And if she's trying to take that away from people, I think it's absurd. She can criticize me all she wants, but I think her job has been terrible. And not just that, look at the prices at the pumps. I mean, we've got all-time high gas prices. When people go to the grocery store and you get a bag of chips, and that bag of chips has more air in it, less chips, and the price has gone up, people are feeling that. It hurts every single family who's sitting around having dinner tonight or going to grab a snack tonight. It's outrageous. It cost me $175 to fill up my truck the other day. And that's, 4th of July, there weren't nearly as many boats out on the water. People just can't afford to do it. And we're likely to see that the U.S. is in a recession right now. There's a few things that have to happen. We've got to get our inflation under control immediately. The other thing that has to get tackled, and what I really want to focus on the most, is our national debt. We have $30 trillion in debt, $170 trillion more than every single day it goes up in unfunded liabilities. That may sound like just big astronomical numbers, but this is real money we're going to have to pay. If people think that there's inflation right now, we're headed for a totally wrong direction. And last but not least is we have to get tough on crime, and we have to enforce laws. I don't want to make our community more dangerous. I want to make our community more safe. And I think arming people, allowing them to be armed to protect themselves, their businesses, and their homes is the right thing to do.
We'll have to leave it there. We're out of time for today. But James Judge, congressional candidate, we certainly appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Responding to this ad from California's governor. What Governor Ron DeSantis has to say about it. Hear that coming up next on Political Connections.